to the broadcast, my dear old fruits. I hope you're excited for Christmas or excited to get the whole thing over. We are going to be looking at some light-hearted matters of royalty as usual, but I've got to warn you that having watched last night a documentary about George Floyd and that incident, The Fall of Minneapolis it's called, I'm sure some of you have seen it, I shall also be addressing more weighty issues towards the end of the broadcast, so you can skip it if that's not your cup of tea during this time of merrymaking, and I can understand that. But from the day we learned about the death of George Floyd, I questioned why it was presented as a murder, why it was presented as a killing, and I also questioned why it had anything at all to do with race, anything at all. And despite some pearl clutching and plenty of besmirchment from certain quarters, I never got any answers that satisfied me with regards to the answers of those questions. And the documentary that I watched makes compelling viewing, and while I certainly remain open-minded to other data, what I saw suggests that there are 3, or is it 4, innocent men who are languishing in jail this Christmas, and one of them for, 19 or 20 further Christmases, 22 years in jail, and one criminal has been hailed as a hero the world over. In my view, that might require some reconsideration, and it looks like it may get some reconsideration. So, there you have it. I will be addressing that later in the broadcast. But for now, for those of you who just want a little bit of jollity and a little bit of fun, then in the spirit of Christmas Eve, their Majesties are snuggling down at Sandringham, and they've been with the Kings of Kerry, Johnny Thompson and the Princess Royal and Sir Timmy, and they were glimpsed on the way to a Christmas Eve service at church this morning, St Mary Magdalene. I loved Anne in red. Doesn't she look wonderful? And there was a beautiful atmosphere, this morning. I noticed it myself around town. Wonderfully mild it was as well. Gorgeous Christmas Eve spirit out there. And well-wishers congratulated their Majesties. And I don't know if you saw this, but the Queen has been praised by Anne. Yes, her sister-in-law has been praising her, and we all know that when Anne talks, we listen. And the people listen because she's so respected. Well, she said about Camilla, I've known her for a long time, off and on. Her understanding of the role and how much difference it makes to the king has been absolutely outstanding. She echoes exactly what I've been saying, and a few of you, my dears. This role is not something should be a natural for, but she does it really well. She provides that change of speed and tone that's equally important. And she also spoke about the moment that the crown was removed from the late Queen's coffin, and she said, I rather weirdly felt a sense of relief. That's it, finished. That responsibility being moved on. So dramatic words from Anne, and the BBC are going to air this documentary, providing these pieces of footage on Boxing Day. So we've got the carol service tonight that might have already aired by the time this is published, and we have this documentary on Boxing Day. So a few Christmas treats coming up. And there were surprise treats from the Princess of Wales at this tea party gathering honouring hard-working people in the childcare sector who were accompanied by 5 children whose lives have been helped by positive mentors. This was a total surprise to them when Catherine waltzed in there in her jolly red Miu Miu cardigan and trouser set, looking glorious, and she gave out Christmas presents. They were shocked and absolutely delighted. Can you imagine their delight when she just turns up there? And this was in advance of Together at Christmas, which will be transmitted this evening. And one of the attendees, football coach Russell Gray, he spoke about the magic of royalty. He said it was breathtaking. She took the air out of the room. I presume that's a compliment. And on the subject of the magic of royalty, which I always turn to in these broadcasts, because most of you, I think, join me in that belief, if you will, or that suspension of belief. Some of you might be a little bit cynical about it. Well, I also received a message from a viewer, Arbacus Woo, who very kindly sent me a little Christmas tip jar treat, as did a handful of you, and you know that I thank you so very much. And It's very kind of you to think of me in your thoughts like that. You sent me a tip jar treat, my dear. Arbocus woo, that's it. And the comment she left me reminds us what royal magic achieves. The diplomacy and the soft power that it achieves, that is often underestimated, but not by me, because it is unmatched. Arbocus woo said, "Dear River, thank you for your broadcast, my dear." Thank you, my dear old fruit. You are most welcome. You're all most welcome. Thank you so much for all the good wishes I've received this week, but every week, to be quite honest with you. The goodwill from all of you always astounds me, and I hope you feel that I appreciate it, because I do. I thought of you as I was reading Bono's autobiography, the singer from U2. He tells us a wonderful story about his father, who disliked the royal family. He met Diana, Princess of Wales, and she won him over immediately. And then you quote from this autobiography, 800 years of oppression disappearing in 8 seconds. If you ever wondered about the usefulness of the royals, I would always point to this incident. 800 years in 8 seconds. The full story appears on pages 347 to 48. Merry Christmas from Alison or Arbocus Woo. Thank you very much, my dear. Yes, well, Bono's father was a very ardent anti-monarchist. No love for royalty whatsoever, as you might imagine, from that part of the world, from various parts of Ireland. Bob Hewson, his name was, I see, and I read that this was at a Pavarotti concert when he came across Diana. Do you understand the power of royalty? It's exactly as Bono says. This is what it does. 800 years of oppression and a grudge that in some ways you could say was very much rightfully held, disappearing in 8 seconds. And the Irish don't take these kinds of matters lightly, and Bono wouldn't be saying this if it weren't true. Trust me, because there is a lot of passion in that constitution and a lot of history. And I saw that Bono also praised Her late Majesty when he came across her for her healing power of reconciliation.
Truth be told, the Irish are more fond of revolt than deference, but I wanted to take this opportunity to acknowledge the extraordinary magic that you made on your trip to Ireland last year.
And he was most gracious, and I'll run some of the footage here you can see of him speaking with Her Majesty.
I hope you know really at a deep level what this meant to a lot of people. Yes, congratulations for that.
So do you see why some of us think that our royal family are to be cherished, among a plethora of many other reasons that make them worth their salt and good value for money? It is the alchemy of the mundane to the magical, as I tell you, my dear. I do believe in magic, I really, really do, but I really think that it comes out of the mundane through the gift of imagination, which is the greatest gift we have. It is what is bestowed upon us. It's why I'm sitting here in a sequined burgundy wrap, a snowflake brooch, and a ridiculous headband with Merry Christmas written all over it, my dears. You know, this is what it's all about. We've got to use it. And it is what adds a little sprinkling, a little stardust to life, isn't it, my dear? This is what we've got. This is what we've got. This is what gives it alchemy. It's why somebody dreamed up the nativity in Christmas. Oh, is that blasphemy? I don't know, my dear. But you know, what better way to dress up a dull night? You know, add a few twinkles and fairy lights and a few prayers into the mixture, and you've got something really rather meaningful, because it gets us through the day, doesn't it, my dear? And it adds value and purpose to our life and reminds us to spread that goodwill and share the message with other people. So when I try to give you a giggle here and there, that's all I'm trying to do, and I see you doing the same in the comments section. It rebounds upon me as well with your wit and wisdom, because it is no secret that this fruit basket and this comment section has developed a reputation. It's developed a reputation all throughout the internet for having the wisest, most savvy, most switched on, and this includes any other royal commentators, comment section, any other mathematicians, scientists, comment section, any great philosophers, any in the world, none of them compared to the ones in my comment section. Do you understand? My basketeers, they are the ones that get it. And they have developed a reputation far afield, in far-flung places, every continent, for being utterly and totally nuts. No, I'm joking, my dear. Totally and utterly it. And in further regards to Diana, Princess of Wales, making an impression, one of her gowns broke all records for her gowns at auction, and I don't actually recall this gown from all the photographs I've seen of her. I didn't really have it readily available to mind as having remembered seeing it, but it's the Jacques Azaguri number, and it was auctioned by Julien's Auctions. I always see Julien's coming up in the press with these Hollywood sales and auctions, and it always strikes me as rather fabulous but also rather camp. I would love to see the founders of Julien's Auctions of Hollywood. In my imagination, it's a pair of old queens, you know, something out of La Cage aux Folles, along that sort of line. But I could be doing a great injustice, although I mean it with great affection. I digress. Julien's Auctions. It comes with a matching illustration too, so it's a bargain value. Sold for $1.1 million, a new record for one of her gowns. It was 11 times the estimate it was sold of. The estimate was 100,000. An unknown buyer, but rumoured to be someone or a company that might use it for exhibition in the future, for exhibiting it to get their money back. Who knows? This particular gown was once purchased by People magazine for only 26,000. This was a few years ago now, but it certainly seems like a Diana gown is an appreciating investment, doesn't it, my dears? It doesn't go out of style or favour. But this dress, with padded shoulders, features a black velvet bodice with embroidered stars in metallic thread and with a two-tier royal blue organza skirt with a sash and bow. It was worn in 1986 in Vancouver and first worn the year before, in 1985, to Florence, Italy. And Diana's son will be venturing to Italy, Rome in fact, in the spring, because we hear a visit has been penciled in. It's the first time the Waleses have gone together to Italy, I believe. Details will be coming. Nobody knows if they're going to meet with the Pope yet or go to the Vatican, but that's a possibility. And talks are in progress at the highest level. So that's something for us to look forward to, isn't it, my dear? Especially in such a stylish European country, to see what Catherine pulls off in that sort of company. And it rather puts me in mind of my first trip to Rome as a child, and I attended a very glittering, sparkling reception that was thrown in our honour at the Spanish embassy. It was next to the Spanish Steps in Rome, and I got on particularly well with the ambassador's wife. And she wanted to occupy me because I was the only child there, and she ended up going to massive cupboards which were off the side of a ballroom. The ballroom area that we were sort of gathered in reminded me of, you know, in The Sound of Music, the huge ballroom there, the ballrooms of Vienna and Salzburg. It was something along that kind of line. Great big gold cupboard sort of concealed behind a wall. She pulled out a ping pong table and we played table football. She thought it would occupy me or delight me. I didn't have the heart to tell her that I couldn't bear any kind of sport, including even table ping pong, but you know, I tried to put some sort of enthusiasm into proceedings. I digress, my dear, but it brings back the memories of glittering nights. Mike Tindall is up to his tricks. He took part in a podcast and he revealed that William is known to me as 1 Pint Willie, and this has been making headlines because he is not the best of drinkers. He was asked about any affectionate nicknames he has for members of the royal family, and he offered one. We also read that his wealth has more than doubled over the past year. Figures for his company, Kimball Trading, show that they've doubled from 440,000 to 930,000, so almost 1 million. This is following his stint on I'm a Celebrity. So, you know, I'm very pleased for him if he's doing well, and I don't begrudge some of the opportunities that he's now snatching up, because he's also had to sacrifice a few in the past. I like him very much. I love Zara Tindall. But, as I've said before, I think that they sometimes tread a fine line. I understand they are not working members of the royal family, but I do ask for them to be a bit more aware of statements and anecdotes that lack dignity. This 1 pint Willie business should have remained private. We don't need to know that. It might make a few people chuckle. You know, I'm not without humour. This may come across as priggish, but we are talking about a future king here. And I understand that he would have understood and known that saying that would generate headlines of the comical variety. Do we really want William to just become a figure of fun, though? Prince Harry did it enough, didn't he, with his Willie this, Willie that? And yes, I'm aware that I call him Big Willie. If you want to think I'm a hypocrite, fair enough, but I'm drawing a distinction between members of his own family coming forward and poking this kind of fun. You know, another prince, his brother, another relation of the cousin coming forward with it. There is a difference, you know. I'm all for the free press. I'm all for, you know, spitting image puppets. I'm all for taking the piss out of them, having a little prod and a poke here and there. Absolutely, and I do it myself all the time. So I'm not meaning to come across as somebody who wants to clamp down on all that kind of fun. I just don't appreciate it coming from members of the family itself. I find it rather undignified, my dear. So I could have done without him offering that information, 1 pint Willie. And Zara also was speaking on this podcast, saying that she feels that she is lucky that her mother did not give her a title. She said, from my point of view, I was obviously very lucky that my mother didn't give us any titles, so I really commend her on that. Yes, many people think that some of the children in the family feel deprived if they don't get titles, when the truth is they couldn't be more overjoyed. They don't want the burden and the responsibility. Titles mean nothing to them. It's not some kind of kudos affair. Harry even said nobody wants the top job. Well, therein lies the exception. The one person that does care about titles, with the exception of possibly Prince Andrew, titles and honours and everything that comes along with it is, of course, Harry, isn't it? Because he wanted that biggie. He's an alpha male. He wanted the title of King of the World. And he ain't gonna get it, my dear. But as for the Tindalls, we hear that their term of endearment for each other is the word munchkin. They call each other munchkins. How sweet. The journalist and broadcaster Nicholas Witchell gave an interview to The Times here in the United Kingdom. You know, the one that was once described by Prince Charles as that bloody awful man. He was caught on camera saying this about Nicholas Witchell. Well, that was many decades ago, and they get on just fine these days. They've since made up. But I'm saying that to say that Nicholas Witchell is no sycophant of the kings or their majesties or the royals just because he reports on them. In fact, quite the opposite. But in this interview with The Times, he dismissed the narrative that was peddled by the Harkles on Oprah Winfrey. He dismissed it. The narrative that the palace machine was against them from the start. Now, this is a veteran broadcaster we're talking about who's very familiar with everyone surrounding the palace. All the contacts, has been for decades. I think he's just about to retire, which is what this interview's in aid of, and why he's feeling free to speak out a little more. He praised the Harkles team during their time at the palace, saying that they were unstuffy courtiers. The Australian Samantha Cohen is described as punchy, who served as the private secretary, and we're talking about Jason Knauf and Sarah Latham, the communications secretaries, that are also described as equally punchy Americans. So 2 Americans and an Australian part of that team. And he says that team bent over backwards to accommodate them and to be in symphony with Meghan. Not one of them was the archetypal Buckingham Palace courtier, and if anyone was going to carry it off, that team would have done so. Meghan is clearly, and I must object to some of this, but he says, Meghan is clearly a very intelligent, articulate, ambitious woman. Well, 1 out of 3 ain't bad, is it, my dear? She's certainly ambitious. And you would have thought that she would have appreciated the fact that these people were working so hard to make it work. It was hugely complex, but I think there was a clash of cultures. I really don't think race was a significant factor in it. I think it was more nationality and culture than race. But I must recognise that I am an elderly white male. Of course, that colours my outlook on the world, and it clearly is not how she or they saw things. Stop taking the knee, Nicholas Witchell, making these kind of caveats. This is what people have been forced to do, to start saying, because I'm an old white guy, you know, I can't really talk, I can't really say, it's not my lived experience. Bollocks! You can say whatever you like. All this diversity training, critical race theory. Done. He continues, if she had perhaps just been less impatient, less inclined to see well-meaning people as being in some way against her, it's sad, particularly the relationship breakdown between Harry and William. Well, thank you for saying that, Nicholas Witchell, even if you are shrouding it in caveats from an elderly white male, as you put it, but one who was not into shrouding her views and opinions, or even overstating them at volume, is the wonderful, glorious and beautiful Misha Paris. I love her. I used to see her about walking her dogs. But she spoke out, and she spoke out about the period after Black Lives Matter came to the fore, and she said that journalists suddenly started calling me up, asking for my experiences of racism in the music industry. She shakes her head firmly. In all the years, nobody had asked these questions, and I thought, why would I do this when so many white people in my career have given me so many amazing opportunities? For those of you who don't know, Misha Paris is a very successful singer and has been for decades, I think since the 80s, here in the kingdom. I don't think you get over oppression if you keep talking about your oppressor. Let it go, head up, walk on. And I applaud Misha Paris, you know, for not succumbing to an attitude of victimhood or resentment, when it would be highly lucrative of her to do so, and very profitable. And this is the thing. The filthy lucre has been drawing people out to find these aspersions and unconscious biases that they feel have been cast upon them. Ask the family of George Floyd. Yes, I'm going to go there. Ask the family of George Floyd, who are compensated $27 million. $27 million fucking dollars from Minneapolis. From what I am being led to believe at this moment in time is a totally fictitious account of his death. The documentary that I watched last night was called The Fall of Minneapolis. I will put the link in the description box. I urge you to watch it. I urge you to share it with everybody you know. It includes unseen camera footage from the body cams of all of the officers involved in this, including the 4 that are now locked up. And it appears to show Mr. Floyd resisting arrest for a long period of time, becoming quite agitated and continually declaring, "I can't breathe." Those famous words, he uses that again and again in the run-up to the moment where he is on the ground, which is where he places himself at one point. From memory, he sort of heads toward the ground of his own volition. He's not forced to the ground. But I can't breathe, I can't breathe. He says this over and over again before there's any sign of real physical struggle or conflict in that respect. He is asked to get into the car. He's asked simple instructions, you know, like put your hands here, stay in the car. I can't remember off the top of my head what they are, but simple instructions that he won't comply with. We later learn that he is on fentanyl, ingesting. As he is speaking, there is later shown a still where you see whatever it is, tablet or substance, in his mouth. So there are various reasons, aside from what he claims is claustrophobia inside the car, that he cannot breathe already at this point, long before he is on the ground. Long before he is, or during the time when he is ingesting this substance, and long before he dies of its effects, of the substance's effects. And when he dies, he is being restrained and he is being held in a hold technique that is recommended, that was recommended by the state of Minneapolis. The maximum restraint technique is what it is called and is what you see being carried out by Derek Chauvin. I'm sorry, I know everyone calls him Derek Chauvin or whatever it is, and I really should pronounce it the way he does. Chauvin. I just can't bring myself to, Chauvin. To me it sounds, I don't know if it's French. It's like calling Lanvin, Lanvin to me. Derek Chauvin. Monsieur Chauvin, excuse me. Derek Chauvin, he follows the procedure to the letter. His family member, I think it's his mother that's interviewed in this documentary, she shows his own copy of this manual that he's handed from his own training guide that shows an illustration of an officer holding somebody in the maximum restraint technique in exactly the same position. And what you see in the videos are emergency services being summoned by the officers. I think it's about 36 seconds, just 36 seconds after it becomes apparent that there is a medical issue. That is when they are summoned. And due to complications on the side of the emergency services who get certain bits of information wrong, there was a big wait. I think, a 10-minute wait before they arrived when they should have arrived a lot sooner. But that had nothing to do with the officers, who also ended up in the back of an ambulance administering CPR and trying to resuscitate Mr. Floyd. But from what I can see, and as I say, I remain open-minded to seeing otherwise, but Mr. Chauvin follows procedure to the letter. There are also interviews with his family members of all the other officers, and if you don't know already, and it's information that they actually, I don't know, held back from the world is the right way to say it, but failed to promote, or it didn't play into the narrative that various political factions were proffering. One of them is black, one of them is of Asian descent, an Asian American, and all of them were friends, and all of Derek Chauvin's colleagues speak highly of him from what I can see, or what is presented in this documentary. There may be others out there who disparage him, but there are those in this documentary of all colours who speak of what a tight-knit group it was, of over 800 officers for the state of Minneapolis, which has now gone down to 500 odd because lots of them have left because they're in fear of their lives and can't, well, we'll speak about that in a moment. But very enlightening interviews throughout this whole thing. That is what I found more compelling than anything, even the footage. It's the genuine emotion from what seemed like gentlemen, ladies of the Minneapolis Police Department and beyond, and family members of all colours. It seemed like they cherished a sort of beautiful community between all of them, and they're living in this parallel universe nightmare where the whole world was told that they are extremely wicked people. And it appears that these 3 or 4 officers were left totally at the mercy of the mayor, who, from the few clips that I saw of the mayor of that time, is a total incompetent, some lily-livered jockstrap fool who allowed the police precinct there to fall and go up in flames during all the completely unprecedented rioting. As for these people who riot in that way, hurling huge metal objects at police officers' heads who have nothing to do with the scenario at all in the first. Hurling metal objects and watching them collapse to the ground. You see all this through the documentary. It's so frustrating. It's so saddening. You want to line up all these hundreds of protesters and punish them in the same way and parade them around the world. They get away with it. The looting, the rioting, the reasonless, senseless arson, damage, hundreds of millions of damage to the city of Minneapolis. It is incomprehensibly shameful, utterly shameful. The mayor seems like a disgrace. There are compelling, tearful testimonies from decent men and women of service who were fed to the wolves, who were attacked as the city was razed to the ground. They weren't protected. They weren't allowed to intervene in the way that they wanted to. They weren't allowed to wear protective riot gear. They were just told basically to take it and do nothing. And from what this tells us, you can tell me if it's true, Minneapolians, apparently, despite what the mayor says, crime has gotten worse and worse and worse. Since then, as I say, they've lost over 300 officers. The city's failing. And the judge does not come across as any kind of discerning character. And what a shame that he gets to wear that word, judge, as if he is any good at doing it. He seems biased. He seems in the pocket of the Democratic Party. Vile words from Pelosi, vile words from her, condemning Derek Chauvin, for example. And ignorant remarks from President Biden that I think are unforgivable for the leader of the country and the Western world, because they can't be speaking after doing any proper investigation into the matter. No justice is what family members say. There was no justice. They're completely out of faith with justice in America. They say there's no such thing. All of those all over the world posting their black squares as if they knew what happened. Those who bought the lie because they wanted to. Is an utter, abominable travesty. And I'm so sorry to you if you've been affected by it. You know what? We all have by osmosis. And actually, it's why this channel exists. Because I think, and it's why I'm speaking about it, because I think that had a knock-on effect. Well, I'm absolutely positive that it did. On the likes of people like Harry and Meghan, who began using it to piggyback on, because it was exactly in the wake of Black Lives Matter that they started having these discussions about re-examining unconscious bias in the family, wasn't it? That was the temperature at the time. Everybody coming forward to state their piece. But there was an unbelievable amount of evidence that was kept from the jury during the trial. They weren't allowed to see all of the body cam footage. Huge portions of it not allowed. And don't quote me here, I can't remember exactly the ins and outs. I only watched it last night. I didn't make any notes. I just scribbled this down this morning, the morning after. But from what I understand, most of the actual footage of Mr. Chauvin with his leg on George Floyd was omitted from evidence, and everything was based around that photograph, which admittedly looks horrifying. You know, the expression on Mr. Floyd's face, the sort of casual look of violence apparently coming from Mr. Chauvin. Actually, when you reconsider knowing what we all know now from this documentary, the reason Mr. Chauvin looks rather casual in the face, and he's not sort of all curled up with anger and in a sort of violent contortion, is the fact that actually he wasn't applying a great deal of pressure to Mr. Floyd, from what we can see and from what we were told. There is a lot of focus on that horrible photograph, which doesn't tell the full story. It's a very powerful image. When you view it next to the footage that has become available and place it in context, it becomes a travesty of the truth. Those cops were apprehending a volatile, heavily intoxicated suspect, one that previously held a knife to a woman's abdomen in one of his break-ins, in one of his many criminal convictions going back from years. He was dealt with in the same manner as anybody of a similar disposition and history and colour would be dealt with. Of that I have no doubt. And regardless of what anybody thinks, that Minneapolis police policy manual that was given to Derek Chauvin and not allowed in court by the judge, that policy manual states that the maximum restraint technique, the MRT, that Mr. Chauvin uses is described as compressing one or both sides of a person's neck with an arm or a leg without applying direct pressure to the trachea or airway. Well, even in that monstrous looking photograph, let alone the footage, that is exactly what it looks like to me. That is what it looks like as being carried out. And throughout this documentary, many black voices, this isn't just whites talking about blacks, many black voices speak out in support of the officers. And aside from the documentary, the academic John McWhorter said, "We were lied to. The whole way we think about George Floyd is wrong, including the way I thought of him. I had no idea that Derek Chauvin didn't kill him." I've got to tell you, it's hard to watch. I had to take several breaks throughout it to get away from the screen because of the rising bile in the pit of my stomach. I find it distressing, alarming, and a total miscarriage of justice based on what I see there. I'm not naive. I understand that, like any documentary makers, this is coming from a certain angle. I bear that in mind. I bear in mind there might be counter-arguments to certain issues, but I find seeing the actual footage of the incident spliced together in this way, forming as complete a picture as is possible from various angles, utterly compelling, and a lot more informative and instructive than one still photograph that made everybody around the world decide there and then that you are seeing the murder of a hero. That is the decision that the world made. You are seeing the cold-blooded, racist murder of a hero. Ha ha! Don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. Do you understand? I am not a lamppost. No dog is going to come past me, cock its leg and piss on me and then tell me that rain is tumbling down from the skies and it's a beautiful, Christmassy, atmospheric, snowflakey kind of day with a few raindrops. No, my dear. I don't care if you are on an Easter parade and you are a fella with an umbrella, my dear, because this Hannah Brown ain't going to be taking no kind of Juanita nonsense from you or anybody else. So don't pee on my leg and tell me why it's raining. And I knew from the get-go. I knew from the very start, and if I sound smug, I am. The city of Minneapolis is falling apart. It's been destroyed. There are vast repercussions all over the world. All over the world and the Commonwealth. And it is no coincidence, as I say, that these accusations of unconscious bias emerge all over the place on the coattails of this movement. While the Floyd family get 27 million, and while the Black Lives Matter leaders, as we see, they're dropping like flies, aren't they? They're all being exposed as crafty manipulators who misuse the millions, the multi-mega millions being donated to them by guilty, salty white tears and white do-gooders and black activists and people of all colour who don't appear to know their arse from their elbow, my dears. Because we all find racism abhorrent. Who the hell doesn't? Apart from 0.1% of every society. Ridiculous. We all find it abhorrent. And that is exactly why people are so scared and so fearful of being tarnished racist. And it is why they are willing to bow down to these activists, these hooligans, these violent rioters, and unspeakably vile creatures who riot in that way and cause pain and suffering for other people, accuse other people, and have absolutely no scruples. There is a complete lack of scruples from these violent people. No scruples, no morality, and dressing themselves up as the ones with morals and scruples. I ask you. Not all of us fell for it, lovey. I'm one that didn't, and I know that there are some fruity ones of you out there that didn't. And it's not because I'm Einstein, but it is because I at least question and I suspend conclusions and assumptions before leaping to them. We'll pick this up in future, my dears. And I'm sorry to bring it to you on Christmas Eve. It's why I left it to the last item of the broadcast, so that those who don't want to be sullied with this sort of information can switch off if that's their want and whim. But my thoughts and prayers for Christmas are actually going to be for all colours, because we all know that this applies very much equally, if not more so, to black people out there who have been accused of crimes that they did not commit. My heart goes to the innocent people behind bars this Christmas and waking up tomorrow not to a sackload of presents, but to 22 years in the case of Derek Chauvin, 22 years with their liberty and their reputation stolen from them. Stolen. I think it is an absolute criminal disgrace. And I think the judge of that trial and the mayor of that city and whoever else was behind all the political goings on should be paraded back into that courtroom and trialed. What for, I don't know. But perverting the course of justice would be a very good place to start. But I shall calm down now, my dears, and take a little Christmassy tonic, and it's bottoms up, my dear. I raise a toast to you and your fruity presents. Thank you for joining me. I do hope you enjoy Christmas Eve and chill out and enjoy the festivities, or just putting some music, some nice classical music or some Christmassy hymns on YouTube and being a little bit mellow and having a little bit of a giggle. So if I've worn you out with my vitriol, I've worn myself out as well, my dear. My voice is going. But one gets exercised, and I hope you can return to a merry evening. And I do wish you a really, really Merry Christmas. And I will see you all very soon. I hope you have a lovely time, whatever you're doing. And ta-ra for now. Toodle pip, my dears.